What ho chaps, I'm MagicalMike, and recently I've been playing Diablo 3, because honestly Diablo 4 looks pretty good and I didn't really feel like paying full price for it, so here we are back in a game that I haven't touched since around 2017. Like and subscribe and stuff, I guess. So yeah, the D4 hype caught me up a bit as well, but I've never really got on with Blizzard's pricing scheme, so I figured I'd be happy just going back to D3 instead, and have been rather satisfied by it. At first I was quite resistant to wanting to play, thinking I wasn't all that interested in the game, but it's changed a ton since I last played and there has been a wealth of things to learn and become invested in. To put things into perspective, I last played when the max difficulty level was Torment 6. We now have all the way up to Torment 16. My last season was the 4th and we're now in the 28th, and you weren't able to equip your followers with more than just a weapon and a couple of rings or something, to which you can now fully equip them with an entire gear set. There's also a totally new mechanic to me called Emanation, which is a legendary effect that applies to you if you equip it to a follower, or to your whole party if you're doing group stuff. And there was also no such thing as a Primal Ancient, something else new to me, which is basically a very, very rare legendary modifier that rolls max stats on the item. So they're pretty exciting to get, even if they turn out to be quite useless for my build. Lots to think about then, plenty of new stuff to get to grips with and learn, which is always something that gives a game a lot of longevity for me personally. Learning mechanics and getting good at understanding and using them in the game is probably the most important part of gaming overall for me. It's that feeling of progress that resonates with me the most. Anyway, to start off, there were two things to look at progressing: the Altar of Rites and the Seasonal Journey. The journey, from what I understand, is just a set of goals that guide you through progressing and gearing up a character to the point of being able to farm high tier content and push the greater rift tiers. It also rewards you with a green armor set as you progress, which will likely be your first set, and will also likely catapult your damage and survivability to greater heights. There's always been a seasonal journey to go through every season, from what I remember, and there's a couple of rewards for finishing it too, like a pet and some portrait frames, just some nice cosmetics to get. The Altar of Rites is unique to Season 28. This thing is insane, and you can tell it's so powerful because it's kinda like a send-off for Diablo 3 before everyone kind of abandons it for the sequel. It's like this whole huge power trip victory lap kind of thing. Basically, you sacrifice various things and items and all sorts of stuff to unlock nodes on the tree. Stuff like gems, crafting materials, bounty rewards, hellfire items, forgotten souls and primordial ashes from salvaging legendary items, blood shards from greater rifts, and unique specific items like, say, Reaper's Wraps and puzzle rings and the Staff of Herding, which by the way took me 4 or 6 hours to farm. That thing was extremely annoying. Why is the gibbering gemstone like it is? Blizzard, please. But by deleting these things, you're able to unlock a bunch of powerful boons. The first two of which give you double XP from kill streaks and remove the level requirement from all items, which makes leveling a new character from 1 to 70 take like 20 minutes, which is absolutely insane pace and a huge encouragement for me to level every class this season. Just slap together a basic crafted armor set and blast through the highest level of Torment for massive XP gain. I was leveling so fast that the skill unlocks couldn't even keep up on the screen. Great fun. The altar also has a bunch of power buffs to it. You get movement speed, increased damage and damage reduction, immunity to crowd control, which is so powerful, not needing to care about defensive skills a lot of the time, passability, so you don't need illusory boots, crits granting you resource so you can just spam crazy strong skills more often, and health globes giving you a temporary shield like the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard gem. All these things add up to making a character feel 10, maybe even 20 greater rift tiers stronger than it should be, with basically no downsides unless you count deleting a Staff of Herding as one. These things have enabled me to rocket characters to the endgame and actually experience super high level Diablo 3 for the first time ever. Sadly, probably at the end of its development lifespan though. But wait, there's more! There's a whole load of quality of life nodes in the altar too. Double Death's Breath drops, pets pick them up automatically, they auto-salvage common, blue and rare items, double bounty caches from clearing bounties, which is great because they aren't super engaging content, double legendary items from gambling blood shards, making gearing characters twice as easy, double primal drops, which is pretty damn hype when you see the red item beam on the ground, and finally auto pick up rift orbs, which makes progressing through those rifts so much smoother since you don't need to walk around to pick up those orbs and can just keep blasting DPS. Not ever needing to pick up items other than gems and legendaries is also amazingly freeing for the gameplay loop. And finally, there are 3 mega potion buffs that you get from sacrificing primordial ashes, which you gain from salvaging primals, which I suppose can be tough to do, but it wasn't so bad for me. Your mileage may vary. Nah. These make your health pots give pylon effects, Oculus ring effects, and enemies do less damage. These are all very incredibly strong effects, especially the ability to just get random pylons every 30 seconds. Crazy. All these things add up to a crazy amount of power, speed of clearing and smoothness in gameplay. It'll be a huge shame when the season is over to lose all these quality of life changes, so it'll be interesting to see if Blizzard re-enables any of them down the line. I feel like auto-salvage and double rewards will be very hard to give up, but maybe they just want us to go play Diablo 4 instead. I started my season with a Necromancer. I really wanted to make a minion build work, because I've never really had that experience with the Witch Doctor or any other class that has incidental pets. I figured Necro should probably have the best chance at that, but I've yet to actually find a build that does it well. I leveled 1 to 70 in about a couple of hours and started doing bounties and Nephilim rifts. I got myself some materials, some legendary gems, and unlocked some altar nodes, and at this point I was realising the Necro was super slow. So I swapped over to a Demon Hunter. I leveled it in about 20 minutes thanks to the buffs, and then I started working on the seasonal journey properly. Fiddling around with some basic stuff and just playing the game normally pretty much unlocked 4 pieces of the Gears of the Dreadlands set within just a few hours. This set effect boosted the DH massively, and I was able to suddenly farm on max difficulty without any trouble at all, a new height that I've not previously experienced in the game. Finishing the next tier of the journey unlocked my 6-piece set bonus, and I was absolutely blasting at that point. The build I'm still using is Rax's Goblin Blaster, which uses strafe to spin to win, firing off tons and tons of hungering arrows all over the place and blowing up the entire screen without really aiming at anything or trying it to do anything specific really. It has a ton of cooldown reduction from Dawn and gems and just general gear rolls, I suppose. Dawn I have cubed because I still haven't managed to find an actual good one, and all of this allows Vengeance to be up all the time, which in turn multiplies my damage and toughness by a lot. So the DH just spams all of its skills without even thinking and spins through everything so fast that I can barely understand what I'm even looking at on the screen. I have never seen Diablo 3 played so quickly, so it's been real novel for me to play like this. And once I had this farming build ready to go, I funneled all the materials into that Necromancer and put together a Tragul's Blood Nova build. This thing, while insanely powerful in how much damage it can potentially do, is so slow. It suffers from this stop-start kind of gameplay where you do so much damage that everything around you dies instantly, but you constantly have to keep moving forwards to get in range and then stop to channel your siphon blood. It also suffers from this weird feeling of squishiness, despite the huge amount of health and toughness that it has, and also a lot of healing that it has. But basically, if I can't blood rush into a pack, stun it with bone armor, I'm just kind of left waiting on the cooldown for a few seconds and hoping that a random spear doesn't one-shot me, which is very common, since I can't actually see what's happening on the screen when I and my simulacrums are exploding 300 times a second. The build is strong, don't get me wrong, but it's tough to enjoy when I can compare it to the smoothness of that previous DH experience. So I shelved the Necro for a bit and moved on to the Wizard. I've never been able to get a Tal Rasha build put together, and when I last played with a friend, he had an insanely strong one in that particular season, so I wanted to play it too. This character was crazy lucky with early gear, most of which rolled the correct stats easily. Meteor damage, area damage, armor, vitality, and intelligence. I had all the specific legendaries for the meteor build within a couple of hours of farming, so I struck out with the new Wizard. This thing is easily the most fun build I've played. It has insane survivability, a super easy way to play, great mobility, crowd control built in, and does stupid damage, all while looking like a power-tripping fantasy wizard that throws tons of colourful magic everywhere. The meteors taunt enemies to their impacts. Each elemental skill I use throws one of the meteors and buffs the others, and without going into detail, as long as I'm hitting enemies and just kind of moving around every so often, my meteors do extra damage, and my resistances increase exponentially. So I just kind of teleport around and blow everything up. I've been using this character to augment a load of gear with extra stats too, and it's just gloriously laid back to play. It reminds me of my old seasonal Witch Doctor, that kind of just walks around and auto-poisoned everything to death, except a hell of a lot faster than that. But yeah, it's great fun. I love this wizard build. Even crafted the weapon to primal quality because that is so important to me. I'm at GR 120 at the moment in that progression, but I think I can easily see this going all the way to 150, given a bit of time, given a bit of practice. At this point I decided to take on the set dungeons. I felt like collecting a complete set of all the class armours in the game and figured I might as well also get some use out of them too. I levelled the remaining classes, Barbarian, Monk, Crusader and Witch Doctor, and set about gambling for all of their respective greens so that my stash could look as cool as it does now. Yep, that is every single set in the game. This was a pretty fun goal overall and kept me engaged for quite a long while by needing to collect a lot of specific items to make these dungeons doable. Like there's a Witch Doctor dungeon that spams poison at you and asks you to never take poison damage to actually master it. So you pretty much need the Mara's Kaleidoscope amulet for that, otherwise you'll drive yourself nuts. I don't actually see it being particularly possible without that amulet. And there's lots of similar interactions for many of the class dungeons too, needing a lot of strategy to get the objectives beaten. So each set dungeon gives you 5 minutes to meet 2 goals and to kill every enemy on the map, while wearing a specific armour set and taking advantage of those abilities. These can be like not taking damage, not letting things into melee, abusing cooldowns to do some crazy skill combo, or hitting a ton of enemies all at once in some big nuke. Most of them were pretty easy. Funnily enough, I actually struggled the most on the ones that were asking me to nuke stuff, because I'm not very good at judging when I have enough enemies in range of a particular skill, so I'd just fail those objectives quite a lot. Luckily with the altar buffs, a lot of these dungeons were made much easier to complete this season and I enjoyed doing them. It was even nice to just try out all of the set bonuses and to get an idea of each of their playstyles too. The Impale dungeon on the Demon Hunter was pretty rough though, just chaining 20, I think it was 100 Impales in a row without missing a single attack. It's not easy. And the Might of the Earth one for the Barbarian was hard too because elites would often die too quickly and ruin my combo objective, so that took me about half an hour to try and get down. And the rest were pretty smooth, given some minor hiccups, but that is how I got the cool wings of the Dedicated and the wings of Mastery, which supposedly still hold a little bit of prestige in the game, so that's nice. And then it was back to building proper usable characters. Barbarian was next, and of course it had to be a Wrath of the Wastes Whirlwind build. Classic, right? It took a while to get it working, but it's a good old classic. It feels slower than the Demon Hunter, because it is, but it's still a satisfying thing to play. Spin to win builds just kind of are. There's not a lot to this build, it's basically got infinite fury, and it auto-rends everything it hits, which then deals all the bleed damage instantly instead of over time, and causes everything to just kind of explode. It's quite satisfying. I've also never had a working Wastes Barb, despite trying to in previous seasons. You just hold Whirlwind, and everything kinda dies. It's great. Monk came afterwards, and at first I wasn't sure what gear I wanted to use on it, but the set dungeons helped with that, and Inner's Radiance was what I ended up settling on. This set works differently to how I remember it, but it's a really fun and surprisingly chill pet build. It uses water mystic allies, and every time it hits things it spawns another ally, up to 10 of them, which also massively increases their damage on top, so it just kind of runs around, cyclone strikes a bunch of enemies into clumps, you hit water ally and suddenly the whole screen becomes tsunamis, which tear through absolutely everything on screen as you casually stroll past all the enemies, and everything dies. Like I said, it's really chill, and I finally am able to play with a pet build. Although I do wish it was a Necromancer and not a Monk. Speaking of which though, I also tried to make the Zunamasa Witch Doctor set work. This is a fetish army set that spawns like 15 little dudes that maniacally sprint around the map like crazies, and every time you use a poison dart, the closest 10 of them also fire poison darts. And while it's thematically brilliant, I love the look of it, unfortunately it feels like it falls over dead at the slightest suggestion that an enemy may have vaguely caught a brief whiff of an idea that you might be within their same zip code, for example. In other words, if you get hit by a ranged attack, you are dead, which is quite hard to avoid with latency from the NA servers that I'm playing on, and having a million mobs on screen at once, and your pets, and all the poison darts going everywhere. It's hard to stay alive on that build. It also relies entirely on the Piranha skill to activate the damage amp from the Zunamasa set. See, the fetishes and your darts do like 0 damage until you hit enemies with a mana spender, and you only have one of those, and at which point the fetishes go to town and things in the piranhas die instantly. Everything explodes. Unfortunately, piranhas is a small area, and it also means that you have to wait on the cooldown of it to get any damage on the next set of mobs. So it's even more start-stoppy than the Necro felt. So then I swapped out for the Spirit of Arakir set. It's spider-themed. Arak something set. Specifically the Angry Chicken meme build. This set bonus feels pretty out of place. It just buffs creature skills by 25,000%, which is meant for corpse spiders and toads and maybe fire bats, I don't remember. But it also works with the chicken hex too. Throwing on the Manajuma's weapons makes the explosion do 2000% more, and lets you run around in chicken form for 15 seconds at a time, at double movement speed too. So you use a couple of buffs, Soul Harvest, Horrify and Locust Swarm, and then you turn into a chicken and just run off to the nearest juicy looking group of enemies and blow yourself up, causing a big chain reaction from slain mobs. It's a fun thing to play on normal enemies, but against single targets like bosses it has absolutely no damage potential, and you're left kind of waiting for the chicken to cool down a lot, which is less than ideal. Which also means I'm now hoping to get the Mundanugu set working next, because that doesn't rely on cooldown so much. But it is sad that the minions haven't worked out for me in any of these builds. And so finally we get to the Crusader, another class that I've previously enjoyed playing, but it's extremely hard to go back to after experiencing the pace that some of these Season 28 builds can farm at. I mean, you've been watching them. Some just fly through content effortlessly, others like the Witch Dark and this Crusader are just hefty and clunky, though thankfully that's alleviated a little bit by the Norvald's Fervor steed weapon set that I'm trying to use. I haven't quite got the flail yet. And these improve the pony mobility and your damage on top of that as well. Pretty much all the Crusader sets felt slow to me, so I just went with the Valor set and the Heaven's Fury skill, because I didn't really have a preference in the end. There's not much to this set either. You blind stuff with your shield glare for massive damage buffs thanks to your Bracer of Fury, you fly between mobs with the pony, Fist of the Heavens every few seconds to get some damage reduction and wrath regen, and every 3 of those buffs Heaven's Fury to deal a huge 20,000% damage hit. It's a lot less stop-starty than the Necro and the Chicken build. It still has a bit of that feel, but it definitely also feels like I'm constantly pushing out damaging skills, but it does also remain slower than the other classes that I've already talked about in the video and demands more focus to keep rotating through your skills, which is not quite like the Demon Hunter or the Wizard, where you just have pretty much one thing to think about. Still, the Crusader does hit the spot with it feeling so chunky and heavy, which is kind of the point in playing a huge tanky, heavy armoured class, right? Maybe I'd also enjoy the Hammer of the Ancient's Barb, but I've not built that yet. And maybe the Blessed Hammer's build, but this one is good enough for now. That, however, has been my journey through Diablo 3's 28th season. I've built a working, farmable build on every single class, I've done all the set dungeons, I've collected every single class armour set, I buffed a wizard to the heights I've never thought I'd ever see in this game, I've augmented a bunch of gear, levelled a load of gems, and had a whole lot of fun doing it too. Now I'm working on cubing every single legendary effect in the game, which is a fun little side goal for me. I quite like having something to work on that isn't just get better gear. If you've been playing Diablo 3, or have done in the past, then go leave me a comment about it. It's fun to hear your experiences as well. Thanks for watching. Cheers.